All right, thank you for staying with us as we brush through the papers this morning. Still on the Daily Nation, very quickly declare heavy rains a national disaster. That's members of parliament who've called on the national government to declare the floods arising from the El Nino a national disaster to allow coordinated national and international support for those who have been affected. And of course, yesterday, on Tuesday actually, the House adjourned its afternoon sitting following a motion moved by Mandera South MP Abdul Haro to discuss the effects of the ongoing rains that are wreaking havoc across the country. We've taken a look at that, and as well as that, meanwhile, let's see what else we have. No tax cuts as the talks team releases a report this coming Saturday. That's the National Dialogue Committee, which will make public its report on Saturday, even as the National Treasury said the tax cuts demanded by opposition leaders cannot be implemented immediately. Treasury Cabinet Secretary Njuguna Ndung'u telling the team that the government is undertaking a tax policy review that it plans to implement in February. And before we get into that, actually, there is a report here by Melita Oletenges as well. And let's have that report where the National Dialogue Committee co-chairs National Assembly Majority Leader Kimani Ichung'wah and Wiper Leader Kalonzo Musyoka saying they are rushing against time to wind up the deliberations between the opposition and government, aiming to release a report on Saturday, which will now inform Kenyans on what they have agreed on or disagreed on. And however, the National Treasury says Professor Njuguna Ndung'u is reported to have told the committee the proposed tax cuts by Azimio can only be reviewed in February next year. Kalonzo says the deliberations on the talks are not conclusive yet on whether the two sides have agreed on the contentious issue of the cost of living or not, and only the report will give a way forward. Let's have a look at that, then we'll come back to the conversation.
Deliberations between the government and the opposition, which began in August, have hit a home stretch as the committee is rushing to beat the November 26th set deadline. According to the co-chairs, National Assembly Majority Leader Kimani Ichung'wah and Wiper Leader Kalonzo Musyoka, the team will be burning the midnight oil for the next 3 days to finalize on the report, which will be released on Saturday. The Ndung'u was in consultation with the committee concerning the high cost of living and increased taxes, which has been top of the agenda for the committee, even as the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition has continued to maintain a hard stance that the government should retract some of its policies on the tax regime.
Our engagement with Professor Ndung'u was centered on the taxation regime, as Kimani Ichung'wah has just said, and of course the very important matter of cost of living. Yeah, so if you give us time, we'll be able to release our report by Saturday.
Very candid engagements of a situational analysis of the state of the economy and what is possible now in the medium term and in the long term. And to an extent, as I said, you are now driving me to divulge what will be in the report. Once we agree on all the nitty-gritties, you will be able to read it in the report on Saturday.
Even as the co-chairs remained cagey on the details of the closed-door meeting with the CS, sources close to NTV have intimated that the CS submitted that the government can only review the taxes starting February next year. However, the committee insists the blueprint to implement the deliberations with stakeholders shall be stipulated in the document. The Azimio team is pushing for a review of the Finance Act 2023 with proposals to scrap the controversial housing levy and reduction of value-added tax on petroleum products from the current 16% to 8%. Melita Oletenges, NTV.
All right, that report there by Melita Oletenges. So Saturday is the D-Day. At least we'll be able to get a guidance on where the National Dialogue Committee stands on a number of issues. But also there is the issue of the tax cuts. But Professor Njuguna Ndung'u has told the committee that those proposals are not viable in the current economic climate. He says the country has maturing debts with accompanying interest that needs to be serviced from the taxes being raised through the Finance Act 2023. So what are these proposals? The opposition had proposed that the controversial housing levy be scrapped or made voluntary among salaried Kenyans. Their other demands include a reduction on the petroleum development levy by 50% from whatever is current now, which is 5.40 shillings per litre to 2.70 shillings, to zero rating of VAT on basic food items. Prof, so where do we go from here?
No, thank you, Zainab. Let me just say, I was with cabinet, with the president and the cabinet on Thursday last week for about 3 hours, and this was one of the issues that was discussed in depth. I think the issue for us is that we know our state of the economy,
right,
and it does have some of those things that Njuguna Ndugu was highlighting. Of course, we know our debt situation. We know how we got there, but we also know that the cost of living has actually gone through the roof. Inflation, particularly on non-food items, is at a totally different level. Ordinary Kenyans can hardly, live or breathe. Investments are fleeing the country. In fact, we had a couple of weeks ago, we had the lowest performance ever in Nairobi Stock Exchange, for the last 10 years and so on. So big investors are not investing, small investors are not investing. The consumer, you and me, are consuming less. So the truth of the matter is that despite all these many taxes the government has put in place, government is actually collecting less taxes. Yeah, so that's one side. On the other side, of course, as Njuguna Ndugu says correctly, we need money to pay our loans. And the way government has gone about that is to have this aggressive fiscal consolidation, basically reflected through plethora of taxes and levies, literally on everything, and double taxation and stuff like that. But it's quite clear that this is counterproductive. And I can say without fear of contradiction, the government also understands that actually this is hurting the economy. And from my conversations there, the issue is that how then do we move forward in a way that we are able to meet our obligations, debt obligations, but at the same time, we are able to then grow the economy. I did share with the team. I was lucky to have been part of the Obama campaign in 2008 and in 2012. And the US economy and the global economy was in depression in 2008. So how do you go about it? Of course, I mean, the issues were a bit different there. But how do you go about an economy that is practically in depression? That's an economy that needs injection of investments, initially by government, and then of course encouragement of private sector to then inject money in there, and you need to encourage consumption so that we can then get that economic life going on. You don't actually overtax in that situation, because you end up actually killing the economy as it actually were. So basically what they're saying, and the government advisor was there, we had discussed this thing with him before, that yes, I mean, literally, and I told him, Kenya is practically under receivership. So how, some of these measures are actually killing the country further. And we need to now start thinking, one of my basic policy recommendations was whatever you do, no harm. Don't make the situation worse than it is already. Some of these tax measures, I believe, should have been introduced in the medium term. Not all of them at the same time. Yeah, because, and I did give the analogy that it's true the patient is sick with multiple diseases. We have got problems of the heart, we have diabetes, we have high blood pressure and so on. Sometimes you have to be very careful how you treat such a patient, because the patient may actually die from the medicine if you treat all this at the same time. My body will start fighting the medicine that you're actually giving me, and they might start reacting against each other. Yes, so my point was very simple, and it remains the same, that government should really be looking at not just fiscal consolidation, but should be looking at how do we then bring investments, both public and private, to spur growth. And that may actually call for reduction of some taxation. Otherwise, the direction we're going, and there's evidence now the direction we're going is that we are actually putting more taxes and more levies, but because
But
of...
which the government says cannot be viable at this point because of already the situation, like you say.
It can be viable, and that's what we're saying. Government is loading more taxes, and they're actually getting less money.
No, but the government says that we cannot.
They're saying that removal is not viable.
Yes.
But in fact, we are saying that is what they should do. Why is it not?
We are servicing the debt here, remember?
Because eventually, and I told them, look here, you see, you may be treating me, and telling me that I'll actually enjoy benefits in 10 years' time, but I'm going to die now. I'll not be there in 10 years. So, and that, really, the president was in there, and we said it very, very clearly. And they did acknowledge that there's something going wrong, and I think all they need to do is to humble themselves and say, look here, what they put on the table is not working. Even if they thought it was a solution, it is not working because they themselves are collecting less taxes. But I know what's happening in government. We don't have people inside government who can tell government that it's wrong or things are not working.
Right.
Yes, from what Professor is saying, I feel like we have a government that is very proud enough to refuse to come out in the open and say, look, we put this thing on you, but we are wrong. He's talking about the struggle in collecting, but I'm looking at the tax amnesty that was there and how much was collected. We collected about 3.2 billion, if I'm not wrong, which is a huge amount compared to. So I'm imagining, what if this period had been extended? What if we incentivize different companies? What if we incentivize investors? You know, we need to look like we are friends, not like we are enemies. A lot of small businesses right now are telling you, do not transact with M-Pesa, give me cash. Which is because they want to avoid, they need to be very careful, they want to avoid paying the taxes. So as he's saying, we need to maybe change the approach of which we are coming to talk to the citizens and asking for these levies. We need to just change the approach and change the language, because right now KRA is beginning to look like the enemy to the people. And that is why everyone is moving away from it and no one is going to it. Secondly, I want to just talk about the ripple effect of the taxes and the levies and the different amounts that are being introduced, like this one of the IDs and whatnot. You've given birth, first of all, to the struggle to get to hospital. I'm talking about the rural areas where, you know, it's a distance and whatnot. And you finally use the money you have to get there. You have to make a decision between clearing your bill and purchasing your birth certificate. Then your child needs to now join school. You did not purchase the birth certificate. So what happens? The child does not join school. We're going to witness a dropout in terms of the recruitments. Eventually, they need to sit for exams. What's going to happen if my child did not have a birth certificate and they somehow managed to join school and they're now supposed to sit for their exams? If I'm supposed to pay 300 shillings for a birth certificate, best believe they're going to pay someone 100 shillings to get for them a birth certificate. So we are also opening up loopholes to encourage corruption within government. So I think we need to also, government needs to look at the ripple effect of some of these taxes that they are giving. It's not just in terms of the economy, but it's also going to affect the kind of skilled labor that we have. It's going to affect the kind of, you know, community engagements that are there. I think we need to incentivize different businesses. We need to incentivize citizens to come out and know that this is a position and we need to help out. We need to provide social safety nets to protect the vulnerable. I don't know how far or how effective Inua Jamii is, because we are seeing a lot of people now, even with the black tax, a lot of people are now not doing that. So if you go to the rural area, you'll find there are a lot of abandoned old people and they do not have someone to just go with them and ensure that they are getting these funds to cushion them. And I think we also need to figure out how are we going to encourage the citizens to also, I know we've talked a lot about the hustler, the government has talked a lot about the hustler fund and how it's supposed to help, but the fund is there for business people, but who is buying from them, who is transacting with them, because there's no purchasing power. So these are some of the conversations that they need to have. And as Professor is saying, if they do not have people who are telling them they are wrong, then they need to come back to the citizens and just say, we thought this was working, it's not working, what do you think?
Arnold, because at the heart of the whole dialogue that was taking place at Bomas of Kenya was the issue of the cost of living, and the questions abound it were, where is the cost of living featuring in all these conversations? We do not want to be involved in politics. And here we are on the issue of the cost of living when Azimio says we need, tax cuts. But the government says, look, that is not possible right now. So where do we go from here?
Again, away from political posturing and the gerrymandering that actually happens around our politics, it's also important to be very fair when we look at some of these subjects. First of all, away from the classical decision-making model when it comes to people in the public sector, where we are running with the basic intelligence, you can call it data, information, public participation, everything else you can group there. So the model, the intelligence, design, and then choice. We also have to flip it and look at it differently. When we're talking about economic management, we're talking about the cost of living, for example. The government cannot afford what we would call programmed response. You know, there are things that, for example, the security downstairs do. Do you have an interview here? Do you have, is your name in the system? If it's not there, that's programmed. You don't enter. So that's a programmed response. The people, at least the politicals, the president, the people running our economy, cannot have a programmed response to all of these things. But also, even those who actually are doing oversight and trying to tell them what they actually should be doing, should also not have what I would call textbook responses or pushes around that. Prof says here, and it's true, Prof was among few people who had a one-on-one with the president. And probably he's under oath not to say what he actually contributed, but I would have expected that Prof did not just give qualitative responses like the ones he's given here. He's a top-notch guy, so when you're going to actually respond to the president, you have got a sitting with the president. I expected that probably he would give us a little bit of the quantitative responses he gave, so that then the president really knows where he's wrong. You know, just telling me I am wrong is not sufficient. So I'm hoping that probably in their private, I will actually ask people on the other side, he will tell us later on.
No, not private actually. I mean, some of the things we talked about, I can highlight here.
Yeah, so I'm actually saying that I'm hoping, I'm looking forward to a quantitative contribution and not qualitative stuff like, okay, Zainab, you are wrong. This setting is bad.
Prof says he didn't go there to complain.
Yes,
he had answers.
Because we've got quite a number of things that really need to be dealt with. Right. And there's also the assumption that government, I've had Bolo here say that government is so proud. The deputy president is on record saying that when he spoke to ISPAC guys and told them, if you have got better solutions, this is our country, please bring them on board. Every time anybody in government goes out and says, we would love to hear what you are saying, give us the solutions you have, it turns into memes, it turns into political jeering on political platforms and everything else. What kind of people are we that do not really complain about being involved? Then when you are brought in, you call them people who are headless. So we also need to choose how we are going about this. Be that as it is, I'd like us to actually get to this particular point. First of all, the demands Azimio is actually trying to actually sneak in have got political ramifications. For example, if Kenya Kwanza, and Kenya Kwanza has actually taken in a lot of the proposals that you hear on TV here, you just need to see policy. Sometimes you don't look at somebody's words. You just need to see the policy direction. They've really taken in a lot of the proposals that have been made by Azimio, proposals made by pundits like ourselves here, people who actually are out there speaking. You can actually see them percolating into policy, which means they are listening and taking it up. They don't have to actually then come up to Uhuru Park and say, okay, good people, we have heard you, now we are at your feet. They actually have been doing that. What I know could actually fail the talks is a demand beyond what is actually being said. Because if policies that, or other decisions that should be made by Parliament, should be made by the executive and other independent institutions, can actually be railroaded through them, like, we are coming in here, you're going to amend the Public Finance Act 2023 by sitting in Stony Athi, coming up with proposals and saying that Parliament has no role in discussing it, they just take that. So then what are we saying of Parliament? We are usurping their power. Secondly, we also are actually just telling people that Kenya Kwanza is unable to govern and therefore they have to outsource it. So on the other side also, Azimio is also trying to rule by hostage taking, where we put you in a corner, you have to negotiate, and then we impose our policies and everything to you. Not necessarily because it's important, but just because we can. So, two sides of the same coin. You're looking at the cost of living, significantly it's come down. That we can't argue. there is the backdrop
Has it?
against. Yes, yes,
I think-
because
I think you're giving
there are
Ali
8.
too much airtime.
There are 8. Let us not really brush this thing with just same strokes of the brush. The truth is that when we were meeting here much earlier, and even with the Prof, is that we were talking about the cost of unga, for example. That particular communication, we don't want now to have it. We cannot be having a crawl when we have got a discussion. Good discussions should actually have some objectives to meet. Otherwise, if we have got this kind of debate crawl where it doesn't end, once we get here, we introduce a new goal. Let's also learn to actually have honest and objective debates.
And
because on the cost of living, partly is come down. There are segments that are running away, and my statement was so clear that partly it's actually come down. But we don't want to talk about that. That's why I'm not talking about quantitative. And I've given an example. Unga, for example.
An example of the inflation rate is it has gone up in October to 6%.
Nobody doubts that.
Right?
Actually, I think you're politicizing an issue that is really simple and factual. Yeah, because what you're saying is that we have a high inflation, and that high inflation is driven by non-food items. That is linked, with imports, with the weakening of shilling, with a number of factors. We know for a fact that food and food products have actually come down, and they normally do come down as a result of the rains, and of course that's also one of the issues that was discussed. That actually Azimio's Kenya Kwanza's sort of agriculture policy and that area of food. Food security and so on. That's one area where Kenya Kwanza has made quite some progress. But on the other hand, all these matters that we are talking about, whether you're looking at the cost of petroleum, whether you're looking at the weakening shilling, whether you're looking at the taxes and so on, this has had a huge impact on non-food products. So it is a fact, the inflation is higher. And it's also a fact that the cost of food has come down. And it's also a fact that the inflation is higher because of non-food products. And those are linked directly with the aggressive fiscal consolidation that Kenya Kwanza is actually pursuing. So those are just facts. But I don't know, the one thing I wanted to really, have you seen this document so that you can actually castigate Azimio for taking Kenya Kwanza hostage? I think that was totally speculative, Zainab. We should not even discuss it.
Not really.
I mean, Kenya Kwanza has not complained that they're being taken hostage. So for Arnold to come here and tell us that Kenya Kwanza is taking Azimio hostage,
unless he has seen the documents. Has he seen the documents?
But they've not taken. Who has complained?
He has asked me if I have seen the document,
yes,
and he's gone ahead to make a ruling. He didn't give me a chance to actually.
But he says you speculate
on
the issues that
I have read newspapers. Last week.
Kenya Kwanza
I also speak to people.
Kenya Kwanza has not complained.
And I'm also actually, I authoritatively am in the know.
Unless you speak for Kenya Kwanza, really.
Okay, all right.
No, if you read newspapers for the last 7 days, you will see that. Clearly.
Let's hear from Ruth.
Let them complain first, then we discuss.
A really wrong thing to give both the executive and assembly to the same party or the same coalition, because then we begin to have there's very little oversight. There's a lot of blame game towards one direction. We've got a legislation that is not exactly independent. We've got institution bodies that are being attacked left, right, and center. Looking at what the discussion we were having behind the screens of the utterances that were said by the Deputy President. So I think, aside from the speculative comments that are being said, I think we also agree that there is no clear communication or clear direction in which the talks are headed. When the dialogue committee was being formed, it was clear that the major issue was, the cost of living.
But the talks are finished now. I mean, we're just waiting for the report.
As they were going in, it was constant that it is the cost of living, it's the cost of living, it's the cost of living. However,
the talks
along the way,
the cost of living, even in public participation, the committee has come belatedly. If she was following the process,
that's why I said, let me finish. Let me continue.
That is not what we want there. There were issues, and that was not top of the priority.
No, when the dialogue
one came in later.
Yes,
but when the dialogue committee was being formed, as a result of course, the demonstrations and the likes, the major thing that was being uttered, that was really bringing the citizen in, was the cost of living, and that is why when everyone was going on, not everyone, but the majority of those, the supporters of Azimio were now laying back, it was because they knew and they were communicated to that we are going to address the cost of living in the dialogue.
But Arnold
committee.
says at the very beginning, on the agenda table was not the issue of the cost of living, which came in
issues
later,
gazetted.
right?
You see,
And we saw in this particular panel
what I've
that the
is-
cost of living was being used by the people who were pushing for the dialogue as an icing on the cake, but then there was the dialogue inside the dialogue.
But was
No,
it really
but what
because
was being communicated?
let's finish.
What was being communicated to the public? You see, you equally said it that what was being used was the cost of living. So ideally, as a common citizen, you know that they're supposed to be discussing the cost of
That is
living, and your
not true.
expectation is that
Well,
you're going to that the cost of living is going to be addressed.
You see, we can be very technocratic about this, but when the country was being was at a standstill and there were demonstrations, it is clear, we know what was discussed in those demonstrations, and what was discussed in the demonstration was not the position of minority leader in parliament. It was not the position of Mudavadi in parliament. It was the cost of living, actually.
Exactly.
So for Arnold again to come and tell us here that somehow he saw a document where the cost of living was not in the dialogue, and this was then sneaked back. I don't know whom Arnold speaks for.
I think Kenya
Because
Kwanza
it makes
Kenya
humans
Kwanza,
bad politics and
unless these two
and-
people
and-
here have not been
and we're
following current affairs.
representing Kenya Kwanza.
Because number one here, you realize that Kenya Kwanza was actually very, very clear that the cost of living was not to be on the agenda. All of us remember that. We discussed that extensively.
And that's why the talks did not begin.
And they did not
at
begin
the very beginning.
Exactly.
Until the issue of the cost of living was added,
to
right?
sit here and say that the cost of living was all there was about the discussion.
No, not
That's
all.
Why?
Not all. I mean,
Because
why
all of us remember. All of us remember that when the demonstration started. When the demonstration started, they were about last year's elections. Why are we behaving like we don't know?
There were a number of.
We were about that.
There was a list.
We were here.
Arnold, there was a list. There was a list of the agendas that were to be discussed.
We actually call out Azimio and say that they actually are using the cost of living, but when it comes to the table, they give priority to other issues, and that is how they actually change.
Okay,
Why are we behaving like that?
let me ask
You are telling us the cost of living wasn't there.
Yeah, so you
No, she said that is all there was. That's what she was saying.
No.
Okay.
What are we discussing?
Kindly let her out.
Let me ask
Okay.
Maliba a question. You do agree that it is until the cost of living was added to the table that discussions happen?
Not true, because I discussed that with you here. I know. I remember.
That the cost of living was not part of the agenda at the beginning.
When we started initially, and even in public participation, if these guys have been
But you
following.
remember when we started the
Not 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago.
I don't know why we're
2 weeks ago
I want
is
us
when
to
we
bring
went to
to
the
the
public
point.
participation. No, Zainab,
All right.
let's straighten this. Why did the committee? Why did NADCO?
What you do, Arnold? Bring the agenda. Zainab,
Stop heckling. Let him just leave.
You are heckling. You are misleading the public on air. I mean, we can allow you to continue.
Zainab, let me finish.
I think
Let us
we-
lie on air.
Zainab, let us just
we need to
finish.
bring it
Let me
up on
just
the
finish.
screen.
Why did we have a repeat of public participation 2 weeks ago? It was because of two issues that had not been captured and dealt with appropriately. It was the cost of living and the issue of 2/3.
Why was it discussed back if it wasn't in the agenda?
And that's why we're talking. Why did it have to come belatedly? Why did they have to open up the talks again if it was the core of what was
Because it was not addressed.
We are arguing
simple as
that argument is actually very simplistic because we had to reopen the negotiation and NADCO had to come back to deal with that particular issue because it was important at that particular point. It was being opened up, but when we started,
Because it
and we
wasn't
discussed here,
But
there is that it was not a priority then. And Kenya Kwanza had actually said that that was not the priority, and the government said that the cost of living will not be dealt with
Okay.
through talks.
Let's just move on further. But at the end of it all, we still have the issue of the cost of living on the table right now,
Yes,
which
it
is
is.
now, at the center of this whole conversation. And we're going to move away from that to something else here.
Yes.
Because, yes, so
I
here
think
we
Arnold
have.
is not sober when he's discussing the weather.
Anyway, look, so this is another one. MPs to visit Saudi Arabia, Russia in 17 billion fuel probe. Well, the National Assembly Committee now plans to visit Russia and Saudi Arabia as part of efforts to get to the bottom of the 17 billion fuel saga. The lawmakers also want to get Anne Njeri's bank details to establish her credit worthiness, as well as summon key government officials. Further, the Energy Committee plans to summon the National Treasury Cabinet Secretary Njuguna Ndung'u and his energy counterpart Davis Chirchir to establish the origin and ownership of the fuel. Why? So the bottom line is Njeri has claimed the 17 billion consignment, but the government offloaded it, saying she had not proven ownership and that the documents she had were not genuine. So now you have the committee chair, you can see him there, Vincent Musyoka, that's the Mwala MP, saying that if need be, it will also invite opposition leader Raila Odinga to shed light on the matter. They poked holes into the narrative so far given by Njeri. According to the committee, they have done some research and some things are not really adding up on the statements made by Njeri, who, by the way, was supposed to appear before the committee yesterday, but she did not appear. She sent her lawyers who said she was not able to appear because I think she was not feeling well. So the committee has resolved yesterday that it will demand original documents from the Kenya Ports Authority regarding this very mysterious consignment, and now the Treasury CS will be required to appraise the committee on whether some money was withdrawn specifically for the oil, as claimed by Busia Senator Okiya Omtata. If you saw that statement, I'm going to pull it out in just a moment. He gives a whole detail of exactly what might have transpired. Njeri, it was also expected to appear before the committee yesterday, did not show up. You can see that. She says that she would be able to be available at a later date convenient with the committee, and the lawmakers also pointing out that Njeri must appear before them at the earliest opportunity possible in order to shed light on this whole saga. So there's a lot of sort of controversy surrounding this 17 billion fuel probe. We've had statements from the government. We've also had statements from the opposition leader Raila Odinga as well. So there's a lot of mystery surrounding this whole thing. Let me begin with you, Ruth. When you're looking at really, because we don't have answers, the committee is investigating what really is going on here. 17 billion shilling fuel, at the center of it you have somebody who's claiming a consignment, the government saying no, this is not a legitimate. I don't know, what are you reading from this?
Reading from this, I think she's just a pawn in a long game, and I think there's more than meets the eye in this saga. Someone once told me that when you see such figures and such high interest from government officials in an issue, then there is somewhere, someone has stepped on the toes of someone very high up in the office. I don't know how true that is, but what is coming out in this also scares investors, because there's a lot of unrest in, especially when we do not have the facts, when we do not have, when Anne is not coming out to speak. So we don't know, is she not coming out because there is some dishonesty from her end? Is she not coming out because she's scared for her life? Because we've also seen the tracks, and it's been shared with us, the traces of her steps prior to the disappearances and whatnot. And we've read also in the newspapers and on different media channels about how she rose to where she is, and the narratives that are being sold about her. So it's a bit difficult to really tell or get the truth behind this, but it seems that there's more than meets the eye. There's a lot of that is being hidden. There's a lot of dishonesty, I think, on both areas. If you even look at how Anne is, I would not want to judge, but if you look at how she's going about the whole issue, it makes me wonder, is it that one, she's dishonest, or two, she does not trust the different institutions that are there? Because if you look at the events that happened prior to her being called to parliament, there was her, going to the different offices asking for help. There was her, there was the issue of it being offloaded. So what are the proper channels? I mean, for such, I think if she has been in the imports and exports industry for some time, she definitely knows what the procedure is like. She would not move such a bulk item if she doesn't know how to go about it? So for it to arrive in Kenya, and then there is a whole theory or a whole narrative about her not being able to have the various licenses, or some dishonesty from her part, her saying, her being accused of the oil not being hers. I think there's more than meets the eye, because there are procedures that are normally laid out. So to me, it just looks like we're not being given the full story, and there's a lot of interest, especially because of the oil prices right now. I definitely feel that this has been brought about by the various interests that are there. And it could, again, as I said, scare away a lot of investors.
All right, Arnold, what are you reading from this? Because I just feel like there's just a lot of information that is surrounding this whole this 17 billion, saga. I don't know, is it a saga, is it what, mystery behind it?
Allow me to chuckle from the headline, or rather starting from the headline, that MPs to visit Saudi Arabia, Russia in a fuel probe. In the world today, do you really need to visit Russia and Saudi Arabia to know if the oil really came from there? First of all, we have got embassies in those countries, realistically so. Besides this particular saga providing being a problem to us as a people,
right.
It looks like it's also set to cost us much more. So we are going to spend about $1 million, $2 billion, $1 billion or $2
sending
billion,
members of
parliament and engaging around
to
this
Russia
and
Saudi.
So in the process, if this money truly was lost from the people, then we'll end up losing probably 20 billion because then around this there's going to be a lot of games that cost us more money to actually look around that. And I also think that that is quite unfair. Secondly, I want to actually ask, implore Parliament not to turn this into a rent-seeking venture, because with the way this is actually posturing around here, these things are so basic. For example, has EACC been activated to deal with this? So far, I've not seen any document to that effect. Has DCI, for example, effectively started dealing with this besides the drama that we know? Otto, Cliff Ombeta and the others have been dealing with around this. We have not seen that. The Auditor General, for example, should be in a position. Ombeta has made an allegation. And has the Auditor General, for example, set up a team that could actually just look back? Because June is not so far when he says that money was actually withdrawn from the Exchequer. Have we seen that working around? So Parliament wants to go, and by the way, the oversight function for Parliament can only be effective with the Auditor General, because the Auditor General, realistically, if you're going to frame government, is an appendage of Parliament, because they can't carry out oversight without the office of the Auditor General. So somehow the Auditor General is not even being, that is the person, the technical person with the tools, expertise, the resource to actually deal around this. That particular person is not even going to Russia, is not going to Saudi Arabia, is actually guys at the apex who are supposed to be making decisions informed by technical people. Also, we are putting the cart before the horse. So the way Parliament is actually handling this, they are so quick on such things. They are more quicker on other things. Like, for example, we've got floods raging around here. They are busy on this particular. Why is it that they're only rushing to issues that have got money, and it looks like, 17 billion is a big thing. Now, on to the issue itself. I think, let's start from this particular point, is that there is nowhere I think I've read where it says that Anne had that money in cash. Because largely today, oil is being brought in by on credit, for example. So as the owner of the consignment, I am not so sure that she paid for it in cash. Secondly, even if she paid for it, of course, she must have used probably an international LC. There is an insurance to that. So if the bank that actually facilitated the process, I bought products through you, I didn't get the products, she will be refunded. If the goods, for example, came and they were lost the way we are trying to actually say it, there's an insurance to actually take care of that, because goods of that nature don't really go that way. But then there's something we are avoiding to talk about here. That the business of fuel in this country is actually a complicated one. That whereas when you're importing regular goods, it's almost like they are liners. I want to call them liners, where they, as in the ships that come in are almost regular. A lot of times when ships that have got oil coming or fuel coming, they say 30 kilometers away from the shore. That is what they call the high seas. Proximity around there. A lot of them idling around there until policy changes reflect in their favor, and that is how traders have actually been working around that. So looks like that, and all of us know that that ship had been in the high seas for quite some time. That is there, it's actually on record. So why was it on that particular end? It also means that there are people who bring in fuel, keep it there, and give it to the people who have the licenses and meet everything that is required when it's actually right. So for the person of Anne, a lot is being said around there. But then she looks like she's a girl who knows her way around government. If you, Zainab, were to look for the CS today, do you know how you would be able to meet the CS immediately? But she was able to pull all that. She went around and whatever is happening around this. This, I think, is something that could be eating into our space when it is business outside of what we should actually be focusing on. So there are people like KPA, they've actually done their statements. Everybody is responding to this. Now we just don't know who is saying the truth and who is not saying the truth.
Exactly.
And at the time as this, we get it really twisted up when we then have got MPs running all over it and not the technical people.
All right.
I think at this particular point, what we need to do is to ask relevant bodies. The Auditor General, for example, can actually help us actually look into this. It doesn't need to take a lot of time. DCI, EACC and other people before politicians run around with this, because most likely this is going to turn into a rent-seeking venture and it will actually then get into a place where we are losing much more money.
All right.
I would actually ask that we give technical people to deal with it and then come back to us with the truth.
But they are the oversight. We have to take a break. However, this coming...
Just one comment.
All right.
Borrowing from what you said, I just want to reiterate, for her to have gone to look for the CS, it either means that we have weak institutions, therefore she's unable to follow the procedure to make a complaint or something like that, or like I had said earlier on, there's more than meets the eye, and there's...
This is an open government. You can meet the CS and the PS when you want. It's not, it doesn't necessarily have to be mischievous.
She just asked Zainab, how would she find the CS? Even now,
she knows her way. She knows, that's why I said, and for me, it looks like she's a girl who knows her way around government. But it doesn't necessarily mean that when government officials are available, that they're only available for mischief.
But why
would be available for public?
And if there is an institution and a procedure.
Okay. No, asking for people to intervene. There is no law she broke by reaching out to us.
No, I'm not saying there's a law she broke.
Yeah,
but there's a process within which you have to follow.
I see that it's only mischievous.
Let's take a quick break. We're going to be back, Prof. I'll get to you coming at a time, especially where there's such high scrutiny as well on the issue of the government-to-government oil deal. All right, let's take a break. We're going to be back. The hashtag #MLiveNTV. Stay with us.
On my dark marks, I've tried everything from A to Z, even vitamin C, but hardly any results. Nivea Lumina 630 works from day one, with visible results in just 2 weeks and 71% dark marks reduction in 12. Join the 1 million women already using the #1 Lumina 630 from Nivea.
When you're finally released from pain. That moment when you start to get back to ordinary, and ordinary feels amazing. Whatever pain you're going through, release starts here.
At Stanbic Kenya, we believe in your financial potential, and we are here to help you reach new heights. Enjoy an attractive interest rate of up to 14% per annum on your savings. Make the most of this exclusive offer today and let your money thrive. For more details, call us today or visit a branch near you. Stanbic Bank.
My name is Andrew Onalena Sisini. I'm the Botswana High Commissioner to the Republic of Kenya. My dream for Africa 2063 is obviously your dream as the youth of this continent. We want to see potent inter-Africa trade, a bustle of commerce and industry by 2063. Kusi Ideas Festival will drive this agenda because it is a potent platform for sharing ideas. I'm inviting you to the Kusi Ideas Festival 2023. This year is being held in the capital city of Botswana, Gaborone. See you there.
Wait a minute, I'm a little confused here. Didn't the two of us just make a deal a while ago?
Pedro, you must have done that deal with my brother.
Mr. Rotundo, how are you? It's Alonso Cortez. Doctor, how are you? I haven't heard from you in a while. You haven't called me either. Oh, that's because I haven't found any news about Mrs. Irena's daughter. But I found out something that you'll find interesting. Can we meet today? Yes, of course. I'm free right now.
Tell me your sins, dear.
Father, I confess to you that I lied to my godmother to hide about what I truly feel about some things.
Carmen.
That's true, Father. I'm sorry to say this, Father Juancho, but you have to accept my confession. That's why you're sworn to secrecy.
Head over heels.
Join us for the January 2024 intake in Counseling Psychology, Education, Journalism and Communication, Peace and Security, Sustainable Human Development, Leadership and Management, African Studies, Philosophy and Theology.
All right, welcome back to the program. You're watching AM Live as we wind up on the last stretch before getting to our rolling coverage of the KCPE 2023 results, which are expected to be announced from, according to the ministry, from 8 a.m. And of course, we'll be giving you a 360 coverage of that. But Prof, we were speaking on the issue of the 17 billion fuel probe. Let me get your thoughts on exactly where you think this whole thing really lies, because there's a lot of information. So many things have been said, and now you have members of parliament. Like Arnold says, I don't see why we need to have members of parliament going to Saudi and Russia as part of their probe. We should have technical people to really get into the whole, murky waters of this thing.
On those, we are on the same page with Arnold, and I think the members of parliament are being dishonest, really, because as far as I'm concerned, and we've raised that here. Members of parliament should have done, and they can still do, oversight of the entire G2G. The questions we're actually asking is how that government-to-government deal was structured. And we came and discussed that here. We said, how does government sell to another government oil or anything like that? It is normally through intermediaries. And how has that been designed to ensure that we don't end up with corruption, rent seeking, and stuff like that? And that has never really been answered. It is only when Anne's issue arises about the 17 billion that we start seeing a glimpse of what's happening. And we have educated people in that entire parliament. Instead of checking the whole rot, they're coming in to only look at the little wound that is Anne Jerry. You see, already we've had guarantees of almost 600 billion getting to 700 billion of the G2G imports. Which are these companies involved? Who are getting these guarantees? Who are bringing in the oil? How much money are they making, and so on? One of the questions that we asked right here on NTV was, based on the design, are we guaranteed that this will deliver what it was intended to deliver, which was basically to stabilize the shilling by saying, fine, now we don't have to buy our oil in dollars and all that. So as far as I'm concerned, the whole thing needs to be scrutinized. Of course, the Anne Jerry one basically paints us as a banana republic where nobody follows anything. How do you just get kidnapped and then held in some strange place, and then you are left without any charges? You don't even know, you're blindfolded, and things like that. I mean, those are things that should not be happening in a civilized nation as it actually were. And meanwhile, nobody's even raising some of those issues. Yeah, so from where I sit, I think the entire G2G needs to be interrogated. And that is what Parliament should actually be doing, oversighting fully to say, look here, we agree with the way this has been designed. We agree, we think it will deliver what it was intended to do.
What do you think is the issue with the G2G deal? I mean, what is there something wrong with it? Is it the agreement that is...
That's what I'm actually saying. We have no details at all about this. In that Parliament has no details at all about it. And that's what I'm saying, that isolating Anne as an issue, in fact, Parliament should scrutinize the whole G2G. not this incident. This is an incident within that bigger ecosystem. So that Parliament can tell us that actually they've looked at the various committees working together, of course, with other institutions. But number one, they've looked at the G2G, and it's okay. There's no problem. It will deliver for Kenyans just as was intended by the executive. And then on the other hand, work with the relevant institutions and authorities, of course, to also address the Anjeri issue, because it is actually of national significance, and it's affecting that program directly. And if the people who are criminally culpable, of course, there are institutions that can actually deal with that. But going to Russia is just going for holiday. I agree.
Yes,
so also then we actually need to go back then look at the deeper part of this. Number one, issues on kidnapping, forceful confiscation of somebody's stuff. Those are issues that are clearly within DCI. I think DCI also needs to actually come out and do a statement. They are leaving so much room for speculation, which is actually very unfair. I'd love to see the Committee on Rights in Parliament, for example. Why have they not called DCI, for example, and asked them that we've got a high profile here, a profile case on somebody who was kidnapped and stuff. Those ones somehow do not have time for her and for such like cases, because if it could happen to her, it can happen to any other person. Also, it's starting to give the indication that probably we're bringing back those secretive units. It's not fair. It's important that that is actually addressed, and that is why I actually was saying that for Parliament now, guys around the Musyoka-led committee now, they want to go to Russia, but they have not taken care of the rights of human beings here. That you can actually just deal with DCI here. Honestly, we need to actually go beyond that. But be that as it is, I think on the G2G thing, the government has even put out adverts. The oil marketers have spoken about it, and so far no one has actually poked holes into that successfully from what I've read. So I think on the issues of documentation and how the G2G deal is actually being worked out, besides politicization, there is not so much stuff that can actually stick on a wall. But then there is a question I really want us probably to start thinking about, invite us to think about it. It's impossible to get even 100 million in a budget when it doesn't exist. It is therefore, and I'm going with the Umtata hypothesis, it is therefore not possible that somebody could actually take 17 billion shillings, from the national treasury if it had not been budgeted for and well worked out. We even have got a controller of budget who's telling us all manner of stuff about what can actually be done and what cannot be done. So, and that particular money, if you look at the claim from the Umtata hypothesis, and I respect Umtata because he has got quite a record on fighting graft. He has not been making empty allegations in the past. If you look at his document, it also doesn't look like research for a week. I do research. I know that kind of thinking, both the legal part of it, the financial, the public finance management part of it, the IFMIS end of it, all that, unless Umtata has got a lot of time. And it's good if you look at his hypothesis. Let me call it a hypothesis. Or rather, we can call it the Umtata theorem on the 17 billion. If you look at it, it's not work that was done in a day. And if you understand how budgeting is done in this country, you will realize that even getting that particular money in there, into the budget in the first place, for example, for stealing, it's so much money because that is almost half the budget of Parliament. Because Parliament should be about 40 billion shillings, right? Yeah, when you're taking 17, give or take, that's closer to about 40% of what the Parliament will be getting in. It's a very difficult thing for two people to just pull that off. Again, it was to pay pending bills, according to Umtata, around the fuel business.
This withdrawal of the 17.2B, right?
For the last, we are still paying the subsidies of the past, that it was supposed to take care of that. So, you then have to sit down, and that is the place where I think that it's important to actually start asking questions. People have spoken about budgeted corruption.
Right.
Does it mean that it actually had been budgeted much earlier? Because sneaking an item into the budget, Prof will tell you here, it's one of those difficult things. Try, come up. That is why you see the fight between Rigiji and county government is because if there's going to be a new thing introduced, that is one hell of a process to even have it go through, leave alone even getting that funded. So, how was 19 billion shillings introduced into the system to the level that you can withdraw it from the exchequer and it doesn't raise procedural processes?
17.2, it
yes,
says, right?
17.2 billion shillings.
So, because it says, and in that document it says, right?
Yeah.
So it was to finance something he mentioned in clause A and B above, which is not disclosed. So he says there is a direct correlation between the 17.2 billion, which was withdrawn from the consolidated fund in June this year to subsidize unnamed private financial enterprises, and the 17 billion contested oil shipment between Jerry and the two cabinet secretaries, that is the Energy CS David Chirchir and Kipchumba Murkomen. But that's his assertion,
so,
that there is a correlation there,
yes,
right?
Actually I'm building a theory around that.
Right.
The number one, either this is a practice that has been in government, and a section of the people who knew how that particular area works, area boys in that particular area, knew how these things worked, and they were not happy that probably that money went that way, and that's why they are trying to build this correlation.
All right.
Something around this speaks to why we actually need to open up the systemic rot that we have in this country, and it is the time when I think all of us, and I think government should be serious for once when it comes to this state capture commission they've been talking about, because 19 billion shillings is a systemic thing,
right,
that you and I, even getting 100,000 shillings out of government,
right,
is a difficult one. So 19 billion means that systemically, then probably we have got ways and channels, people have actually, they are tapeworm inside the gut that is actually government, and we need to actually deworm. We will not deworm by speaking about it. We need very serious deworming medication.
So this is
state
just
capture would be a very good way. This for me would be a lead that helps us to know who are the people who think that this is how it used to work, and probably that's how it's working now. How has it worked in the past? Can we go back and know who actually, because this money, by the way, was supposed to be dealt with last year. If we had money by the time there was a changeover, it would actually have been dealt with the way the telecom deal was actually worked out. But unfortunately, by the time we were going to elections, there was no money.
So you're saying a symptom of a bigger problem?
Yes.
Right. Yes, Prof, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I think it's just the sort of coherence around this issue that again, you start actually having, you wonder what's going on, because the Energy CS said clearly that the oil does not belong to Njeri, and that the oil actually belongs to Galana. Now, of course, one wonders what information he has that is actually not revealing, and what is the role of this Njeri in the whole fiasco. But of course, more absurd, Malala, who's the party secretary,
right,
claims that the oil belongs to Uhuru and Raila.
Right.
So we're getting all these things. I mean, I think somebody might just claim that oil belongs to Omenya. He was speaking whatever.
Such statements creating even more confusion,
exactly,
of a situation
and
speculation.
And to me, that's why I think Parliament needs to be, just again as Arnold has said, Parliament needs to sort of step back,
right,
and ask what their overall oversight is in a situation like this, and then go about it in a very systematic way. Yeah, as opposed to saying, oh, we'll call Raila to talk to us. Yeah. We'll go to 1, 2, 3, 4 things. I mean, they need to take a step back, because this is significant. Whether it is money that was gotten from, from the consolidated funds, whether this corruption, the deworming thing that we're talking about, those are procedural things, and the guys who have mastered how this happens in government, whether there are criminal issues involved. Because I mean, Anjeri gets kidnapped, the minister says the oil doesn't belong to her. You see, Kenyans would assume that maybe the minister is on the same side with the kidnappers.
All right.
I mean, so to sort of debunk those things, and actually, Kenya is decent in terms of how we moved on with our rule of law. So for me, it is bringing back that fidelity to the rule of law, where you're communicating to everyone. And again, Arnold, I think, also highlighted that very well, that if I'm an investor coming into the country, then I'm not worried that I'll just disappear. The conversations that were being put there by Anne's lawyer are very scary.
Okay.
That basically whether you're alive or dead, can be determined by just a couple of individuals.
Yeah. And you see, Prof, that's why I was asking, are there no Is there no system? Are there no procedures that I need to follow if I'm making a complaint? Is there no system that I can use? I mean, why would my goods have an issue and the next thing that happens is that I am being kidnapped? Why do I need to, as I say, if systems were working, Arnold, and this is the point I was trying to make earlier, I don't need to run to someone in high up in office to help in a certain issue, because I know I will walk into this office, I'll present my papers, and my issue will be sorted. So I think, like Prof is saying, and as I had said earlier, we're chasing away investors. We know in certain countries that investors will land and they are kidnapped. And it is a very normal case to the point that it doesn't make it to the headlines, because it's something that happens every other day. Is that really the direction we want to go to as a country?
Arnold.
I think I would support first Prof when he says that there's need for coherence in communication, because the government, and including the owner of the fuel of the consignment, Galana, at least so far the legal one, that we've seen, saying that KPA would accept documents and everything else. There's a paper trail that KPA does, and actually they will how they would receive. So Galana has actually given their side of the story and the consignment. The CAS also says that he reached out to KPA, and according to the documents, because there is a body handling that, and that is how the government has actually responded to that particular issue and put to task. Unfortunately, then there is that small matter of the party, the UDA party, then them introducing a third angle to it, and that then becomes a problem. It's also unfair that the communication side of government sometimes looks like a madhouse. We cannot have the CA saying that the fuel belongs to Galana, and Malala and the other people in UDA saying that it belongs to the people he is mentioning. We need coherence around that. So we have got the Galana aspect, we have got the Malala theory, then we have got the Raila theory, then we have got the Mtata theory. And then Parliament now is showing up, they want to come up with their committee theory from Russia and Saudi Arabia. So we have got five. We don't need to cloud this particular process. And underneath, there are basic human rights. Like, for example, we're talking about people being threatened, human rights and stuff. The committee in Parliament on that has actually not done anything around that. So why haven't they spoken about that? We want to go elsewhere, and we're not dealing with what is closer to us now. So I think that on that particular end, there is an agreement that we need people to decloud this process.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. And I think we'll leave it at that. When I'm going to just read out a small story here, but when we come back, we'll talk about the expected release of the KCPE results, and of course, just some nostalgia, I guess, because I think all of us here have gone through the KCPE, this being the last one. But the increased uptake of online payments and the desire to leverage on it has seen Kenyan-founded fintech firm Virtual Pay Group set up its global headquarters to the global payments market. The fintech group is also riding on innovation to tap into the growing space as it seeks to provide innovative payment solutions to merchants, and as more people opt for online payments on account of convenience and other benefits that can be reaped from the same. Virtual Pay CEO David Morema says the decision to establish the global headquarters in Mauritius was informed by the country's positioning between Asia and Africa, which it deems strategic. Also attributed to the move is a regulatory framework in the island country, which Virtual Pay describes as robust, the quality of workforce, as well as Mauritius' approach to fostering innovation and economic growth. The company also has presence in Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, and Dubai.
The move to set up reflects our resilience and commitment to continuous improvement. I'm especially grateful to our Mauritius merchants, some of whom are represented here. I'm grateful not for the business you've given us so much, but more for the ease of compliance that you've given us.
All right, and back to our discussion this morning, which is, of course, let's just touch on the issue of education matters right now very quickly. So what we do know is that results of the 2023 Kenya Certificate of Primary Education examinations are set to be released in, according to the ministry statement, in about 15 minutes or so. So we'll be having a rolling coverage of the same. About 1.4 million candidates undertook their KCPE, and 1.2 did their KPSEA exams. That's the grade 6 learners. And this year's cohort will be the last to undertake the KCPE to pave way for KPSEA, which is now under the implementation of the competency-based curriculum in primary schools. And of course, course, the curtain now falls on KCPE. It was 38 years old, and this is where we say goodbye as we have the final results of this cohort, the 2023 cohort who were sitting for the last KCPE exams. Prof, some nostalgic feeling there?
Of course, yeah. Some of us were smack in the middle of KCPE, amongst the very first groups. Yeah, so it is, we feel like now we belong to another ancient era.
A different generation.
A totally different generation. Yeah, of course, a bit of nostalgia there.
Right. Ruth?
I've got to first of all, of course, applaud the current government for not going back on that. I know there were a lot of fears of, is this system going to be changed again? Do we need to, learn it again? So I have to applaud them on that. When CBC was just being introduced, we saw a lot of parents doing, especially for the kindergarten level, we saw a lot of parents doing the work for the child, as opposed to letting them go ahead and figure out how to put together the scarecrow on their own. And so I think along the way they've sort of figured out how to assist as opposed to being the ones to go ahead and do the homework. But earlier on there's a story that you ran here where the teachers were saying that junior secondary is getting a raw deal. So even as we make this transition and as we are going ahead, I think we may want to continuously involve such stakeholders just to ensure that we don't have another conversation about transitioning or changing the system just as this particular cohort is settling into it. So I think that would be my only reflection to it. But of course there's a lot of nostalgia. I like that the anxiety around the KCPE results is now being removed. And I just hope that
is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing?
I think it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing because one, for those who perform very, very well, there's a lot of pressure to maintain the same thing in high school. But remember, the dynamics are very, very different. But also, two, for those who we deem not have performed very well, then there's a lot of self-esteem, low self-esteem that begins to creep in. It's very difficult for them to sometimes cope in high school. And for me, and I think I speak because I've done both systems. I did 844 and later on transitioned to IGCSE. 844 had a lot of cramming. There was a lot of cramming of, and it was not prompting me as an individual, and I know a lot of people resonate to that, to think beyond what is being presented here. So what then that happens is that as you transition along and as you get into the workforce, you begin to work around the box. You don't begin to think outside, you don't challenge yourself. And so for me, I think it's a good thing.
All right, Arnold?
For me, it's a mixed feeling because a lot of the good minds you see around here were brought up by the 844 system.
Right.
It's functioned, it's brought this country to where it is. It is the hammer with which Kibaki used eventually, the hands that delivered the miracle that we talk about. We talk about the working people that actually did the heavy part of it. But also, my only problem is that curriculum review should not be made to look like an event. It should be a process. Because we are now looking like now we are the children of Israel crossing the River Jordan. And that is wrong, because even for 844, it's been reviewed severally. You realize that there were those of us who were doing 700, we were marked out of 700. Then there was the team that was marked out of 500. Over times, the subjects there were mutations here and there. So for curricular review, the only thing that I know that we are crossing River Jordan is that we are moving entirely from what they call the merit-based approach to a competence-based approach. That in and of itself is a good thing because the future of work is changing. But the way we've gone around that and politicized the process and gone around, it's really made it look like it's a very difficult thing to do. We should have actually just crossed over effortlessly. It would have been an easy thing to just move. You see the way we are moving from the old generation, I think, is it the third generation ID, the plastic based?
Yeah, it's the third too. It's the second generation actually.
Second generation to the third generation. The new proposal now that we just move through it effortlessly without necessarily making it look like it's an event. So that then you don't feel like it's going to be difficult.
But at the end of it all,
because for 4 years, we are still going to have 844 here for 4 years. Because we will actually, a total of about 8. We will have.
Still continuing.
It's still continuing because we will have.
Now we have the KCPE
this final cohort running for the next
4
years and then,
in high school,
4 years
and then they will still have 4 years in university still. So it's a process. You realize that even with that, even as we celebrate and make it look like we've crossed River Jordan, we still have got aspects behind of the wilderness. That if that is deemed a wilderness, they will be here for the next about 1 decade. So also it's too early for us to actually say that CBC could actually look like this. We've not looked at the products yet.
And that's why we still have issues coming out like this, union still asking the president to move JSS to secondary
schools. So what we need is actually, we need a framework.
Right. Yes,
we need a framework that will onboard the rest of the aspects procedurally, because we are not going to get money miraculously that will actually do. This idea of an event, you know, when you're having an event, the sound, the tents and everything else must be paid for in time, have the MC and everything there at once. Some of these things should be done. This is a system, should be onboarded over time, as opposed to making it look like now, today we are moving over. Not true, not possible.
I fully agree with Maliba's sentiments. On the matter of the complaint, I think it's totally unfounded, because for those of us who are in this sector, we know that our secondary schools are not very functional, and they're not functional because majority of them, a number of them are boarding. They're boarding based. We actually have more day schools at primary level, and then most of our secondary are boarding, which we don't even think is a good thing in the first instance. So one of the headache that the previous government didn't deal with was where to locate this, because if this goes to secondary schools, then it would actually meant that last year secondary schools were going to have an additional class. And then this year, they are also going to have an additional class. And already, the government boarding schools are packed. The boards have done whatever they can do.
But is it the same case in primary schools where you have, they're also talking about issues of infrastructure, saying, look, we already, JSS is domiciled in primary schools. We lack that infrastructure, we lack the critical
resources. It's easier, primary schools lack the infrastructure, but if you listen to my argument, is a bigger issue. What we've actually argued in the past is that we should actually have a school system that supports and reflects life as it actually were. So we're sort of encouraging government to move away from boarding schools as much as possible, so that we actually have as many day scholars as possible. That mimics real life and builds the student, in a slightly better way. But having said that, I mean, from my own personal position, and this again reflects what Arnold was saying there. Of course, system changes are shocking, and that's actually what we've done. And curriculum review is meant to happen, throughout. So the question still lingers whether we need a system overhaul, or we need just to to work on the changes. But anyway, that bus has already left the station. But one thing I want to say, which is really why I like CBC, and that's where our education should go. We must ask ourselves fundamentally, why are we educating anyone in the first instance? The 844 and other systems brought in this unhealthy competition. Life is not about competition. Life is about development of our potential. It's about development of the student. And students have different potentials. Some are designed to be preachers, others will be engineers, others would be hustlers, others. So if CBC can deliver that, so that I don't have to worry about who was number 1 and who was number 10, but I'm more concerned that I came here as a musician, how far have I developed that talent, then CBC is a good thing.
All right, that's the right way to go. All right, so I want us to wind up on that note, because in just a couple of minutes, actually less than 4 minutes, we're going to begin with a rolling coverage of the KCPE exams results expected to be released today. And of course, according to the ministry's announcement, that is supposed to start at 8 a.m. Smriti Vidyarthi is also here in studio. She'll be taking us through that coverage, and later on at 11 a.m. we're going to be having the Swahili team take over. About 1.4 million candidates undertook their KCPE exams this year, and we also did have the KPSE exams. That's the Kenya Primary School Education Assessment exams, where the grade 6 learners, about 1.2 million, did also do their exams. We're going to be receiving those results as well, so you want to stay tuned for that. Remember, this is the last cohort of the KCPE learners who will be sitting for the exams under the 844 system. But We shall be seeing and analyzing exactly how the results will be coming out. Professor Alfred Omenya, thank you so much for joining us. Ruth Bolo and Arnold Maliba, thank you as well for joining us this morning for this conversation. Suddenly, this is where we wind up here. Remember, stay tuned because we're going to be coming back with that coverage of KCPE results 2023. My name is Zainab Ismail. Good morning.